You know the song, and wahala, where we will see.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this edition of the program Presidential Aspirants Live. In an effort to create the much talked about level playing field, the Liberia Broadcasting System thought it necessary to host this program on a daily basis in order to accommodate all the presidential aspirants in the ensuing elections slated for July 19. I'm Janet Johnson along with Winston Mumbo and Baba McGill, your presenters. Our guest on the program today is Professor Haji G.V. Kromah. He is the standard bearer of the All Liberian Coalition Party, ALCOP. Welcome to our studio, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kromah, could you briefly tell us a little about yourself and what you stand for?
Well, firstly, we are very pleased to be here and very much touched by the physical condition of the ELBC studios here, deplorable condition, and I'm so touched by it that we have to reprioritize the reestablishment of an effective broadcast radio and television station. The question you ask is difficult to answer because we cannot talk much about ourselves without sounding like boasting. But we can only say that we believe in the principles of justice. We believe in the principles of bringing about a government through peaceful means. We're against putting up a system that discriminates against any sector of the population. We are for the establishment of a society that guarantees security and freedom, and we belong to a party that embraces all of these principles and philosophies, and therefore we are happy that the party has been accepted by a broad spectrum of the Liberian electorate, and therefore we look forward to the challenge of the management of the government with the support of the people.
Mr. Kromah, I believe you are a former Director General of the Liberia Broadcasting System and former Information Minister. And looking at your past records, one will say you are a politician. Now, the civil crisis in Liberia, why didn't you use a more diplomatic means, in your contribution in the earlier stages of this crisis, but instead you went the military way?
That means, your question means that you have your facts mixed up, because we exhausted while we were in Monrovia, 1989, 1990, right after the invasion of this country by the MPFL, all means, including all of those means that you talk about, to the extent that we all were driven out of the country, went into exile, and were chased into exile by the MPFL in the form of the RUF into Sierra Leone, and threats against other places, including Guinea. And it wasn't until almost the exhaustion of the series of conferences including the Yamoussoukro 1, 2, 3, 4, that Ilimo was finally organized as a resistance movement. And we're very happy that we organized it, because I do not know whether you were here in 1992 when octopus were threatening you and the lives, and the lives of others in this Monrovia. And we came to the assistance and the aid of the people in this town, successfully resisting the takeover of this city by the MPFL. Subsequently, we actively participated in all of the conferences, serving even as drafters of many of the agreements, making compromises, fundamental compromises, to the extent that we're able to help in forging the current peace that we all now enjoy. So we're very proud of the methodologies, approach, commitment that we undertook to bring about the current state of peace in the country.
Mr. Kromah, what can you say about this long-standing debate in our community? It has to do with this Americo-Liberian Congo man and the tribal man, to the extent that, in fact, others are saying that you are not a Liberian per se, but if you read the Liberian history, you find 16 tribes, which of course you are a member of one. How could you address yourself to such a debate?
Well, I haven't heard nobody saying that I'm not a Liberian. I think the issue here is a strategy developed by people to keep people divided, not only in Liberia, but on the continent. It's a colonial strategy that is embedded in history, inherited by those who wanted to use power and authority illegitimately and keep exclusive possession of the resources of the country. So it is a continuous strategy used by a certain group of people or types of people. But it isn't working, because from the evidence that is clear and apparent, with the kind of mass support for a party like ACU, the 19th of July, this Saturday, will serve as a period for the fundamental correction of those fundamental misconceptions, deliberate orchestrations of divisions among the people. So it's an old-fashioned thing. It isn't working anymore, even though people are hanging on to it. People wouldn't have any real chances of success in these elections. So they're hanging on these kinds of things. But as I've said, it isn't working, and therefore it's nothing to worry about, because the vast majority of the people have decided that they will be part of the All-Liberian Coalition Party. The nomenclature of the party clearly indicates the principles of the party and why people have embraced the party. And they're going to take a decision on Saturday to put back into proper perspective all of these issues. Now, if you look at the history of Liberia, we've had 20 presidents, so-called elected presidents, ending with President Samuel Kanyundo. It is only President Samuel Kanyundo that was an indigenous person. 19 preceding him were of Americo-Liberian stock. Interestingly also, about 14 or 15 of those 20 presidents were born outside of Liberia. Outside of Liberia. They were not born in Liberia. They came here as adult children or adults. So we've been having immigrants who were born outside the country to come here and become president. I would say there was an accidental interruption between 1980 and 1990 for an indigenous person to serve as president. And you saw the kind of frantic move and activities to try to wipe out that portion of history so as to restore a rule that was not based on popular legitimacy. So we are of the opinion that all Liberians are entitled to their inalienable rights and their rights as citizens of this country. Even though we've had more than 100 years of Americo-Liberian rule, no one should exclude any Americo-Liberian stock, such as Charles Taylor, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, out of the presidential race, or such as Marcus Matthews. But they should equally be part of anything that a citizen is entitled to. But interestingly, it is some of these people who quietly or secretly carry on these messages of division among the people. And that's why I said that it's not working, because the population of this country is going to be very decisive in terms of fair play and justice with respect to the history of this country, with respect to the people, the configuration of the population, those that have ruled the country for so many years, and the outcome of that rule. So I think a decision is going to be made on Saturday to continue or to establish a leadership that is based on the rights of the majority of the people of this country, including the rights of the minority.
Mr. Kromah, when ULEMO was formed sometime in 1991, if I'm correct, you told the Liberian people in the world that you were coming as a resistant movement and that you were not out for power. But as time went by, your organization, ULEMO, began to be one of the major demanders of power, as demonstrated through the various political arrangements which put into place, the current arrangements. Please reconcile your initial intent and that of the latest.
Why you want a reconciliation between something that is not contradictory? You just said that we started as a resistance movement. Resistance to what? Resistance to forcible taking over of power. We resisted that. We advocated a peaceful and democratic society, political arrangement, which would involve all sectors of the citizenry. I don't think you believe that we were advocating for a peaceful society that would exclude us. Then that would have been contradictory. So there's nothing to reconcile. We are participating freely in the democratic environment that we have helped to create.
But your colleagues say you deviated from your initial intent.
Well, what is the deviation? I mean, we stopped the MPFL from taking over the country by force, and then we have joined a party that had a convention. Where is the deviation?
Well, we would like to apologize to our many listeners for not being able to receive any calls today due to technical problems. We won't be receiving any calls today since our phone is completely down. We have another reporter in studios with us today, Bokari Musa. I think he has a question.
Honorable Kromah, quite recently, local politicians resolved to support a presidential candidate hailing from Lofa County. But unfortunately, all of those that made the promises belong to different parties. How sure are you that these people meant exactly what they say?
Well, I don't think they were forced to say anything, and they seem to be people of credible standing. They made public statements in an open place, at an open forum, so they stand to be judged by the population. And in any case, they are opinion leaders, but they are not. They do not constitute the totality of individual votes. So we are sure of the votes of the people in Lofa County, just as in the other counties. So it is a question of proving one's credibility or not.
Mr. Kromah, granted that come July 19, I declare winner, what kind of government do we expect to see on the ALCO-led leadership?
Well, the first thing is that we have become the only party to clearly prioritize security. And security must be a natural priority in any setting, especially Liberia, given the war and given the impact of the war on Liberia and Liberians and the West African sub-region. Therefore, we have prioritized a government security system that will prevent the reoccurrence of the type of invasion or war activities that were brought into the country. And we do have the capacity among our membership, as was proven in activities prior to ALCO, and therefore that would be number one priority, and we're very serious about it. And we believe that we are the only party that can provide the necessary security balance that will guarantee all other forms of activities in the country. Secondly, we will prioritize, as part of our platform, the development of consciousness against injustice in the society. The bringing about necessary awareness among the people of the advantages of the war and the need to realize that we have no alternative but to coexist as one nation and as one people. That has to be embedded in the minds of the population through various communication strategies, radio, television, diadic communication, face-to-face, and other forms, so as to establish a mat that will serve as a foundation, springboard for all other types of activities. Then, of course, the establishment of a government of inclusion will be next on the agenda. We, as an ALCO government, see the country as one people, and notwithstanding the differences as expressed in establishment of various political parties, we feel that we are all the same. And we feel that a victory for ALCO is a victory for sanity, for security, and for progress. And therefore we include everybody. We ask various political parties to nominate people for the cabinet, for the judiciary, and other public offices. And then we'll move on to the rehabilitation of public infrastructures and the provision of basic public services, including electricity, water supply, because a lot of these things have been destroyed. These are the immediate concerns of the ALCO government. Then from there we will get into the mid-range activities of consolidating the gains of the first period in terms of security, in terms of consciousness against injustices, in terms of establishment of the government of inclusion, rehabilitation of public services, and restoration of public services and rehabilitation of public infrastructures into a full-scale implementation of the economic programs, which will include what we consider compartmentalized privatization of parastatals, public corporations, where certain departments of public corporations be given out to investors on a franchise basis, so as to avoid a psychological collapse of the public corporations, because Liberians are always afraid that when you're going to privatize, they all will be out of jobs, and especially those at the top. So we will retain the public corporations as regulatory agencies, but their effective service departments will be privatized on a contractual basis so as to improve efficiency. We also going to encourage small-scale industries being established based on the incidence of raw materials that we have in the country. It's very strange and amazing that you export logs out of this country and you don't even have toothpicks produced, manufactured in Liberia. Toothpicks, that is so elementary. You have rubber being exported out of Liberia, and you don't even have the manufacturing of rubber bands to put around the $500 Liberian dollars. I mean, this is a shame. So we don't want to go into utopia, some big manufacturing type of package, but the basic things that can come out of the resources that we have here will be encouraged. And those things that look so simple, so basic, are those that coagulate to provide the basis for bigger employment, bigger labor, increased income, purchasing power for the average person in the society. So we are going to be concentrating on that type of economic program. We're going to emphasize efficiency in government. There's a legacy of laziness that has been imposed on succeeding generations from the Americo-Liberian culture, saying that they came to rest at the beginning of the establishment of the nation. People just rested around the place, and they never really carried on any development. Everybody wanted to be so-called civilized, wear tie and shirt, sit in offices. So the value of labor was never cultivated. But over the years, we've seen a gradual departure from this. The ALCA government will put together programs that will encourage a dramatic departure from this lazy syndrome, from this lazy heritage, into a productive society, so that people will be proud of earning and not begging for things. People will be proud of making sacrifices and therefore having respect for what they earn. So these are some of the major programs. We're going to be emphasizing quality in government in terms of officials. We're not going to have people at assistant director levels, everybody receiving presidential appointments. No, that was a strategy to try to bypass the public civil service system, which helped to corrode and erode efficiency in the government. So we're going to strengthen the civil service system, where we will provide for professionals who don't have to be appointed by the president in order to make a reasonable living in government, in order to be respected in government. We're going to create a merit system where people will go upwards in their professional career, be well paid, even possibly more than the minister, and therefore don't have to be appointed by the president. I work in the government for 20 years, and I saw all of these errors and and we made corrections in areas that we headed, LBS, Ministry of Information. So as President of the Third Republic, with the cooperation of the Liberian people, I think Liberia will be a different country, and I don't think it will take more than 2 years to put Liberia ahead of the rest of the West African countries.
Well, before Kenneth come in, please, Prof, just let me add, are you contemplating on fiscal policy, a good fiscal policy? You didn't touch on that.
Well, fiscal policy has to do with the overall policy of the government. If you are talking about efficiency, certainly includes fiscal policy, because efficiency means proper management, maximizing the profitability, the gains of resources, whether human or otherwise. Economically, we stand a very good chance. We have a very good history of open door policy and laissez-faire type of economic program here, and there's a psychological confidence in Liberian business environment, so we can quickly recover economically. So we're going to emphasize what we've talked about: privatizing, compartmentalized privatization, a small expansion of small-scale industries, and you see a movement, a gradual movement away from government employment by people voluntarily into areas where they see their income higher. And when that begins to happen, government will automatically be trimmed. And then when you deploy the meritorious system of professionals working for reasonable pay, you will have to exact and demand from them efficiency, productivity. And when that happens, it cuts across fiscal policies. You can be specific about fiscal policies in terms of both monetary and fiscal policies with respect to the currency situation. But all of these are functions of the overall productivity of the economy that will determine the strength and value of your monetary system, and therefore it will give you the bearing of your fiscal policy. So the fiscal policy will be part of the general policy of efficiency in the government.
Mr. Kromah, there is a saying that the past is the foundation upon which we build the future. Now, you once served as a state councilman of this republic. You have just mentioned or highlighted programs that you plan implementing in the instance where ALCO becomes successful comes July 19. When you were councilman, did you implement any of those programs?
Yes, I mean, for example, here at LBS, a lot of things have broken down. I think your shortwave was off the air, and many things were not working. I think you were even operating on an exciter in place of a transmitter. I don't know whether that has changed, but a lot of moves were made to try to replace those broken equipment and try to upgrade it at least to a reasonable level. And I'm happy at least that you're struggling to still remain on air. And I believe that we serve in the government as a balance, especially in the areas that we've mentioned, security. We tried our best to prevent other members of the council or the government from carrying out deviant behaviors that were not proper in the government. We undermine most of these kinds of activities that help to keep the government going up until this time. We, even though we were not the oversight person for some of these public corporations, we paid our first visits to these areas, LEC, LBS, Water and Sewer, many other places, encourage the people there and conscientize the need to have these things work again. I think LEC took off and then collapsed again afterwards. We visited the hospitals and inspected the facilities there. We made some initial arrangements to help these areas, but there were limitations because the basic mandate of the government was to guide the peace process, as well as the difficulty of carrying a six-man sort of presidency, even though you had an area, but that area was interrelated with other areas. It was difficult to make the kind of bold moves necessary to implement the kind of programs that we talk about, sharing power in that sort, even though the advantage of that sharing of power reflected in the achievement of the peace we're talking about, collective and mutual confidence that was necessary to implement those programs that we've just enumerated here.
Mr. Kromah, we have a question here from one of our listeners, and it says here, you are widely believed to be a tribalist as manifested in your nominations to the LNTG2, of which most, if not all, of your appointees are of the Mandingo ethnic group. How would you comment to this?
Firstly, to say widely, all these adjectives are just political strategy. Who established the widely? I can tell you that even some of those that were appointed, nominated by Ulimo, I didn't even know some of them. Whenever we call a meeting of government officials nominated by Ulimo, people had introduced themselves. 60% of those who were appointed, we were never in Ulimo. And sometimes, for example, people insisted that Dr. Vamba Kane was Mandingo simply because his name was Kane. And you should know that he's not Mandingo, he's Gbandi. So people are not a lot of people. Few people are very ignorant, and they take your name. Okay, now if you see, they're very deliberate in the choosing of names and comparing it with tribes. Okay, now because if you want to be logical in doing that, if you take a name like Taylor, it should be a British or American name. Why wouldn't you assume that he's a white man? But if somebody's name is Kamara, you will automatically eliminate the possibility of his being a Vai, a Mende, or a Gola, a Timini, or whatsoever. And you just say he is a Mandingo. You understand? Why Janet Johnson can be a British or American person? Why they have to be a Liberian? Okay? I mean, so you see the deliberate tilting of names, all of these things are aimed towards creating instability in the configuration of the population, so as to marginalize their chances of benefiting from their rights as citizens from resources of the country. Those who serve in the government are themselves testimonials to the openness that we adopt in the government. Let me tell you something that may not be a secret. In the setting up of the various distribution of positions within the ECOWAS arrangement, I can tell you that I was instrumental in ensuring that the LPC stroke coalition got their share of positions. Because in my room that morning in Abuja, when it was finally concluded that George Bola will represent a group on the Council of State, I think the excitement of that success on their part made them to forget on the issue of power sharing. It was I who inserted in the document, word for word, that the LPC, the positions that were allotted to the erstwhile ICNU will revert to the LPC stroke coalition. That sentence, word for word, was inserted in the document by me. And that's how LPC stroke coalition got the positions that they got in the government. Also, we advocated that even though the AFL could be attached to that, we thought also that General Bowen had played a very important role as Chief of Staff of the AFL. That was a party. So some consideration should be given to them. So General Bowen got, in fact, that Minister of Defense position was allotted to Ulimo. So we gave that up, plus several other positions in government, to the AFL. We also advocated that individuals like Tom Woyu, Sam Doki, and Francois Masakwe, who have been heads of some warring factions, even though they all were coalition people, but should be given specific positions. So they were given specific positions, ministers, deputy speaker, and associate justice Supu. Additionally, the positions that were allotted to Ulimo were halved, cut into half, in consideration of the ethnic configuration with respect to the Crown people. So Ulimo J was specifically given positions. In fact, they were the only group whose positions were clearly identified in the agreement. So what we did actually was to carry on a division and distribution of positions right there at the conference table, so that it became obligatory, it became legal, it became legitimate, and nobody could tamper with it. Then a little portion that remained with us as Mother Ulimo, that again was spread out among various tribes, various categories of people. And as time went on, we even replaced people with more efficient people. So that is an erroneous thing, and it is considered widely as erroneous.
Mr. Kromah, let's go to the issue of this intra-Ulimo fighting, which left hundreds dead and the destruction of property in Tottenberg and other places the organization controlled then. The two major tribes which made up Ulimo, to be exact, the Crown and Mandingo, have since been divided. This posed a lot of threat to the peace process then, as demonstrated through the fighting that occurred, which degenerated into the fight for the control of territory then. You had General Johnson on the one hand as leader of the defunct Ulimo J, and you were on the other side. What was responsible for this intra-fighting really?
I don't know what area of the media you connected with, but I will avoid being personal. But as a professional journalist, you should have also cited the public declaration by Mr. Taylor during the April 6 crisis, when he was apparently disappointed that people of the Crown tribe were not being grateful to him, were not being appreciative. And then when he revealed on radio, and he played on this radio station, that he fundamentally helped to establish Ulimo J financially, materially, and otherwise, and militarily. That statement was never reported, and so you can see why this thing went on. It was a successful undertaking by the enemy group, military group, the MPFL, to try to destroy the resistance movement of Ulimo by causing a split. And people can be tempted. So that was the basis of the split, and it is part of the ongoing strategy that we talk about, importing indigenous people against one another, importing tribes. You saw what happened between the Gio and the Crowns, and Taylor came and said he was helping to redeem, quote unquote, the Gio people against the Crowns, but we saw that sooner than later the leaders of the Gio and Mano people got missing in NPFL territory, and there's a clear irony that you're trying to redeem the people by making them to disappear. And so that's why people like Prince Johnson immediately came to the realization that they were being used. So this strategy of using one tribe against the other, okay, is the foundation, is the bedrock of the culture perpetrated by people like Taylor. Okay, and so he confessed that he went between the Crowns and the Madingos. And incidentally, even though those two tribes were the predominant tribes in Ulimo, no tribe is large enough to organize any warring faction here. So there were other tribes in both Ulimo and Ulimo J. But essentially, just like the people who were fighting each other before, the Gills and the Crowns, realized that they had to reconcile. They had to reconcile. The Crowns and the Madingos have reconciled to the extent that ALCO today has a very large Crown membership, very active and large Crown membership. In fact, ALCO has more Crown people than any Crown-oriented party will have.
Mr. Kromah, you just mentioned that during the April 6th fracas, Mr. Taylor confessed that he was instrumental in the split that occurred within the Ulimo faction. But yet we saw you linking up with the NPFL during this April 6th, linking up with Mr. Taylor. Do you regret, coming together with Mr. Taylor during the April 6th fracas?
It was not linking up with Mr. Taylor. You understand me? And we have to live with these propagandas that are built up and encouraged and pushed. People were attacking people, and therefore you had a right to defend yourself. It's just like when somebody gets up and say the war laws, okay, for propaganda and political reasons, they say war laws. You know very well that we didn't invade this country. We organized Ulimo and stopped the NPFL. But it will not be politically convenient for you to come and say, and just describe one of the warring factions as war laws. Then people will praise Ulimo, and therefore you, as a political opponent, you feel that this will be giving advantage to ALCO or to Ulimo. So you just try to bunch everybody in this war law situation, and that doesn't work. It hasn't really worked. So it's the same as trying to say you link up with Taylor. You understand? The entire government was there, the 6-man Council of State. Okay, if it's a question of linking up, then everybody was linked up. Whatever has happened in the government since 1995 should be shared by everybody, including IGNU that was succeeded by other groups. So this was a situation where ECOMOG, retreated from several places, and people were left to be killed on their own and by themselves. And you think what's going to happen? I will sit there and say, well, because Taylor is going to be killed when I'm killed, or when I'm killed, Taylor is going to be killed, and therefore, if we are killed together, it's a good thing, so I will allow myself to be killed? No. We had to defend ourselves. But if you want to be true to yourself, you saw the attitude and you heard the pronouncements we made. We continued this war. We took decisions and actions that brought an end to that April 6th war. We nullified decisions that were taken by other members of the council to try to encourage decisions that were taken to encourage bitterness, to incite people. We nullified these decisions arbitrarily. We play a very instrumental role in bringing the whole thing under control. Even before the war started, you asked Bowen, General Bowen, we did everything possible to try to peacefully have the situation handled. But again, it was encouraged by people connected with the Sawyer grouping because they saw this again as an opportunity to make a political capital out of a growing potential destruction. And what happened? They all ran and went to the Kromah base and remained there and left the people in town. Okay, so what is their responsibility? You see, these kinds of people who always put people together and then in the middle of the river, they abandon them. They, for example, I mean, not digressing, but look at the alliance situation. At the beginning of it, we saw people like Sawyer actively supporting Watterson. As soon as Bacchus and Tipute got out of the alliance, and it looked like things were not working very well, immediately Sawyer and party shifted to Elvin Johnson Sirleaf and left Mr. Watterson in the cold. So this kind of hypocrisy has been going on, and most of the things that you talk about here, claiming to be a widely held opinion, these were things that were propagated by that little clique headed by Sawyer. And I've never had anything personal against him, but it is important to expose these kinds of things at the right time.
Well, in case you're just tuning in, this is the program Presidential Aspirants Live, and our guest in studios today is the standard bearer of ALCO, former Councilman Haji Kromah. We like to apologize for not being able to receive any calls today due to technical problems here in studios.
Well, let me come in, Regiment. Mr. Kromah, your admirer or sympathizers described you as a decent, flamboyant young man who is visionary. Now, you have traveled to a lot of places and you've seen a lot of faces. And I am sure in political, economic, and social arena. Now, of these people, who do you see as your mentor?
Which people?
People you met, presidents, the man down there, the man up there.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the words intended to be commendation. I don't know why the insertion of flamboyancy. I don't know what aspect of me look flamboyant, but anyway, we were influenced, or have been influenced by the upbringing, the realities that we faced in Liberia, in the village that I grew up in the villages and towns that I grew up in my days in school, high school, elementary school. I saw the level of injustice and contradictions in the society. For example, I was 3 or 4 years old when I was sent out there in Sivilahun, in the Kolahun district of Lufa County, where my uncle was the imam, and I was growing up there. What in the 1950s, I saw people being taken and carried to do forced labor called porter work. I mean, they were forcibly taken to go and work for so-called district commissioners who were of the American-Liberian stock, sitting in Kolahun, and they had to have their farms brushed and other things done. And they were carried in hammocks. People carried them in hammocks on their head. Can you imagine total human beings that were not ill? I mean, they were sitting comfortably in the hammocks, and somebody coming from Monrovia, I was sitting there watching, and this was like out of sanity for me. I couldn't understand why people had to be taken to be put into forced labor. And then when I came back to Monrovia, in my school, I saw young fellas, my age group, who come to school in vehicles, driving their own vehicles, official license plates, and and we would go into the bathroom and they would take up opium to smoke, and they would say, Kromah, man, you got a green home, man, you got to grow up, you're not enjoying your life. And then when I get back home, the environment is totally different, and that type of life is subdued. Different things are being said to me, and as I grew up, I saw more of these contradictions, which actually meant injustice, and then I look at the composition of the government. everybody had the same kind of name, and most of the people were from the same type of places. And then I started asking, what's happening? I mean, I saw my father. He was working in the government, Minister of, I think, the Department of the Treasury at the time, the Customs Bureau. And I saw his level of dedication and compare it with other people who were not even going to work, who didn't even have the kind of education he had, and then were holding big positions in government. So I just got all boiled up growing up, and then just naturally turned out to be an activist to resist this type of reality, bad reality in the society. And so that was the beginning. So as we grew up, we read things and got to admire the Pan-Africanist, those who were committed to the respect for the dignity of the black man, respect for the dignity of the African, and those who were associated with those things, we respected them, we admired them. Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Sekou Touré, Agostinho Neto, Amilcar Cabral, the concept of negritude as espoused by Sida Senghor, the war, the Jomo Kenyatta and the others were involved with in East Africa. Of course, Frantz Fanon and all of these other people who were involved in struggle to try to establish the dignity and the decency of man, coincided with the kinds of things that were naturally imposed on me growing up. And that's why later on at the university, when I saw some of the professors coming and they were preaching communism and they were preaching socialism and the other type of things, I didn't have problem with the concept of people needing to be equal. But I had the portion that had to do with God, you see, to try to explain the existence of everything without the consideration of divinity. I had problem with that, and therefore I had problem with the whole concept of communism. Okay, so this is how we grew up, and this is how we developed the philosophies and values that we follow today, and that's why we feel that we are committed to a just society, a society that respects the African, the black man, the right and potential of people to develop, to fulfill their own purpose of existence.
Mr. Kromah, we have barely 5 minutes to go on this program. We would like to know, in case ALCO becomes successful July 19, what are your plans for those who committed war crimes against the Liberian people?
We don't have plans against things that have not been enumerated in the ECOWAS agreement. To the contrary, we have plans for reconciliation, because when you talk about war crimes, there will be nobody left out of this country here. Starting from Sawyer and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, all of these people who organized and financed the MPFL to bring war into this country, we have to start with them. We have to investigate how Taylor managed to escape from the federal prison in the United States, whether he was helped by the government of the United States or not, because we have to also find out who assisted in the bringing and facilitating of these arms and recruitment of people to come and bring war into this country. And some of these people who are looking very innocent now, who facilitated, okay, and hit some of these weapons and people who organize these various war activities. So when you start, as we say in Liberia, when you haul rope haul bush, so we want to leave that and go ahead with what ECOWAS has put together, with the spirit of reconciliation and forgiveness, so that we will concentrate on what is common and positive to all of us.
I think Bakari Musa has the final
Yes,
question.
I want to take you back to the campaign tour recently in Bon County. we observed that a group of ex-fighters of the National Patriotic Front of Liberia presented you a statement in support of your leadership. You also complained that they have been abandoned. If, for example, you happen to win the forthcoming general presidential elections, what do you have in package for them?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not only MPFL fighters, but all of those who fought directly or indirectly are Liberians and are entitled to the fruits of a one nation, of a peaceful nation, of a nation that is going towards democracy or who have become democratic. So we consider everybody, including Mr. Taylor, as part of our assistance package, security, to benefit from the security that will be provided by the ALCO government. We are not going to discriminate. We don't have the ability to hate. Personally, I do not have that ability to hate. So I wasn't very surprised when I saw MPFL young people coming, presenting statements in Nima County, in Bond County. This wasn't the first time they have been leaving the MPFL and joining Limo before the disarmament. But I think that they believe that we are sincere and that we did not, one day nobody ever heard that we gave orders to execute anybody in Ulimo. And they know that in NPFL people used to be executed 10, 15, 20 at a time. And when I saw these ex-fighters, I myself, I was very much touched by the deplorable conditions which were existing. But I felt that the time was too short to do anything between that time and election time. So we have a package that is not too specific for any one group, but we provide general opportunities for all categories of Liberians to be able to benefit from the new society, from the new environment and the new nation that will be put forth by our collective decision.
And as fellow Councilman Haji G.V. Kromah, he is the standard bearer of the All Liberian Coalition Party. He's been our guest in the program today, Presidential Aspirants Live. Again, we'd like to apologize to our many listeners for not being able to receive any calls today due to technical problems here in studios. A repeat broadcast of this program comes on at 9:30 tonight. You may also join us tomorrow morning at 9:30 for another edition. On behalf of my colleagues Winston Mumbo, Bobo McGill, and Janet Johnson, thanks for listening.
No make that same mistake. Let's go say if I be in 1962 election, I be free and fair one. Ben no be day, kuku jumbuku no be day. 1967, the opposition party nine in women. But 1973 election, problem in the day. The opposition party been boycott the election, and we all remember it then we be happy. So let we change the way so that we don't go make the same mistake. And the next election, we dey come for we in a salon. How long we go sit down and we consider well. We all get to join us so that salon go before.
Just listen to Presidential Aspirants Live. You can join the station tonight at 9:30 for a repeat of that program. This is ELBC, the radio service of the Liberia Broadcasting System. The time is 4 minutes to 11 o'clock.